become king. You could see the debate starting. Boy said, raising his eyebrows in a way that indicates he knows how much of an understatement that is. But the debate has subsided. It'll probably go on for ages. I'm sure he hopes. As fuzzy as his memory is of that night, though, Boyce knows for sure that he didn't spend it pulling out his hair, ruined by the anxiety of losing the biggest show on television, one that had buoyed his network for half a decade, precisely at the time when Apple, Disney, and HBO's own parent company, Warner Media, were diving headfirst into the streaming business, ramping up production to levels that might swallow HBO's more boutique operation whole. It was much more of a serene night for Blois, mostly because he spent the last 2 to 3 years pulling his hair out preparing HBO from the day Game of Thrones went off the air. At the onset of 2019, the end of Game of Thrones, and specifically how HBO would carry on without it, was deemed the defining story of the year. Game of Thrones series finale is approaching. How will HBO survive after it? Asked the LA Times. Winter is finally coming for HBO, Variety declared. For years, the premium cable network had triumphed critically and commercially on the wings of Thrones Dragons, and the show turned into a sun in which everything else revolved, which is always a dangerous thing for anything, because you are going to lose it eventually. In retrospect, the Thrones finale was when HBO's fortune turned, at least in terms of narrative. The controversial Game of Thrones brought the beginning of Chernobyl, Craig Mazin's miniseries that found a surprisingly sizable audience and went on to garner 19 Emmy nominations, perhaps maybe because the fact it came on right after Game of Thrones. Meryl Streep's arrived, crucifix sitting on her bottom lip, along with the second season of Big Little Lies, which eclipsed the first installment's commercial success to the tune of 10 million viewers per episode. As summer progressed, Sam Levinson's Euphoria, shout out to Euphoria, that was a great show. As summer progressed, Sam Levinson's Euphoria, as the first HBO show to focus so heavily on young adults, wrested control of the cultural conversation, one on-screen penis at a time. Then came the second installment of Succession, arguably the best season of TV in 2019. At the same time, Danny McBride returned to HBO with the incredibly critically acclaimed Righteous Gemstones, connecting more than he had with the Vice Principals or even Eastbound and Down. As the calendar turned to fall, HBO released its first stab at a superhero show with Damien Lindelof's Watchmen, a feat of complex storytelling and the creative world-building that has seemingly pulled off the impossible by successfully adapting Alan Moore's legendary comic. Where there was one behemoth show, soon they were critically acclaimed series for every type of audience, and they really set that up incredibly well. And that's obviously the benefit of planning from Casey Bloys, realizing that, hey, this show may be off the air soon, we should probably plan like it's going to be off the air soon, because it will be off the air soon, and we need to do something about it. When Casey Bloys took over from Michael Lombardo as president of programming in 2016, he knew that winter was coming. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss had already stated they planned to end the show after 8 seasons, and Bloys wasn't going to push them off their resolution, unfortunately. They have a very specific plan about the number of seasons they want to do. He told the Television Critics Association in 2016, "Believe me, as a new programming executive coming in, if I could get them to do more, I would take 10 more seasons." But they take their lead on what they think they can do as the best version of the show. Bloys was taking over at a volatile time not only because Game of Thrones was ending, or because Silicon Valley and Veep, two highly successful comedies that Bloys shepherded as HBO's head of comedy, would also end in 2019. The landscape in 2016 barely resembled the one in place when Bloys first came to HBO at the beginning of the 21st century. The advent of the streaming demolished the concept of synchronized viewing, while cord cutting in general not only diminished viewership numbers, but the very system that was used to quantify those numbers, as tech companies learned they could release metrics only when it served them, and not just have it Nielsen just snitch on them, quote unquote, every single week. Netflix started a talent war, scooping up the likes of Ryan Murphy and Shonda Rhimes for hundreds of millions, and at the same time, the company accelerated the production in a wager that the route to domination was not necessarily through quality, but sheer quantity. Others followed, and the amount of scripted TV had risen in 2016 by 71%. So, with that atmosphere, I think one of the biggest stories of 2019 is the fact that HBO, they managed to not only survive, but thrive after the wake, in the wake of Game of Thrones, and that is, I think, probably the biggest story. The year began in the whole landscape of TV here. That is for sure. So, in 2019, in news and politics, there are some pretty other major stories
that
I do want to get to, and we will get to them,
starting
and with a countdown of the top 5 best TV shows
2019 as the longest government shutdown in the United States.
You know what, screw it, I got 10, let's do 10, alright. So, number 10 is Sherman's Showcase and Documentary Now, which is really kind of catnip for pop culture obsessive. Both these series were labors of love that could only really existed on IFC. Sherman Showcase was a variety series from Bashar Salhuddin and Diallo Riddle, presenting a long-running African-American dominated variety series in a elaborately detailed showbiz universe adjacent to the one that we know now. Documentary Now's third season was the most audacious, with creators Bill Hader, Fred Armisen, and Seth Meyers, as well as Rhys Thomas, exploring new parodic terrain. The highlights were a send-up of D.A. Pennebaker's company cast album documentary with original music and spoof of The Artist Is Waiting that gave guest star Cate Blanchett one of her most iconic roles. Let's turn now to Deadwood in number 9. The turning of the merciless passage of time to its advantage, the long-delayed revisiting of David Milch's prematurely canceled Western was set 10 years out of the final episode, and will have brief, soundless flashbacks into its storyline so deftly that it seemed like if the entire town itself was doing the remembering. And a touching and ultimately life-affirming meditation on age, death, evolution, and forgiveness, the film doubles as a piercing final statement by Milch, who is suffering from Alzheimer's disease and is unlikely to write any more scripts. On Netflix, The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, directed by Louis Leterrier, and developed by Jeffrey Addis and Will Matthews. This continuation of Jim Henson's 1984 cult classic, built out of the story to allow for political and theological satire that will intrigue some and amuse adults while flying over the head of most kids who probably shouldn't be watching any of this because of the violence and scariness and all that stuff. So yeah, good stuff there. The Kingdom is the hands down winner of the best show that you've never even heard of. This is a South Korean import from writer Kim Yoon-hee and director Kim Sung-hun. Might be the best use of zombie genre for social satire since George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. It's set in the late 17th century, where an emperor has gone ghoul, but his advisors keep his transformation a secret so they can execute a secret takeover of the realm. While the series is a study of how epidemics are allowed to spread for expedient political reasons, the script's depiction of official corruption, class inequity, and triumph of superstition over science might prove scarier for American viewers than the brilliantly staged flesh-munching action scenes. Although it's destined to be known with the season with the hot priest, the second go-around for Phoebe Waller-Bridge's fourth wall-breaking psychological comedy was an exponential improvement on its predecessors, focusing more sharply on the present-tense moments of interaction between characters and hurtling through the plot so confidently. The whole thing felt like a product of a creative self-dare. The idea of how perfect can I make this? I just really go in. Number 5, Euphoria on HBO. Television cinema has had no shortage of tales of drug-addled, sexed-up, yearning, lonely teens, but none took the genre as far as creator and executive producer Sam Levinson, who concocted a superheated melodrama filmed on sets that could be pulled apart to enable stylized lighting and acrobatic, at times omniscient-seeming camera work. The brazen excess of Euphoria synced up with the too muchness of the story. Euphoria really was the only TV show that I had time for this summer, so I kind of ate it up. It was a really good show. I think it was really good. I mean, I don't think any of it was realistic to the lives of most teens, but Rue, the main character in that show, lived a pretty crazy life, I think, by most teen standards. Certainly by my standards. I'm not taking pills every day, but so yeah, that was kind of probably one of my most compelling shows of 2019. Perfect. As we just talked about, a perfect next bridge for me after the disappointing ending Game of Thrones, which I got into also a lot in 2019. A little late, granted, but I think it was along with a lot of people my age that sort of really got into Game of Thrones as the season came to an end. Number 4, Russian Doll on Netflix, masterminded by star Natasha Lyonne and her co-executive producers Leslie Headland and Amy Poehler. The trippy series about a New York computer programming becoming unstuck in time was a tribute to the classic films that shaped their sensibility. All that jazz, The Shining, and Defending Your Life. But it immediately established its own sensibility and managed to neutralize even the most obsessive plot guessers in the audience by springing surprises that came from characterization, philosophy, theology, and physics. So this is a show for repeat viewing, that's for sure. Number 3, Succession on HBO. Jess Armstrong's series about a New York media family headed by a Rupert Murdoch type quickly moved beyond its basic premise. Essentially, King Lear meets Arrested Development, and became a corrosive study in the consolidation of financial as well as emotional capital. The second season delved more deeply into the lingering trauma inflicted by the father upon his children, humanizing the family without ever losing the electrifying contempt for the billionaire class that marked the show as a stealthy, populist satire for the world's true rulers. Number 2 on FX, Better Things. The third season, the writer-director star Pamela Adlin's series of 50-year-old actress and single mother was the series' best, finding increasingly inventive yet controlled ways to tell the stories of parenting, work relationships, and intergenerational tension. Finally, number 1, When They See Us. As the title suggests, Ava DuVernay's 4-part miniseries about the so-called Central Park 5 reframed history, insisting that a bunch of scapegoated teenagers railroaded and raped us all charged were innocent human beings with lives. Thus, is a faceless problem to be solved by police and the courts. Like, these are real people, and that inflation, that kind of putting perspective on it was something that was not altogether prevalent at the time. So. Alright, we are now going to move on, and we've talked, I think, way too much about TV. We're going to talk about something that I personally know a little bit better. The music game. Hey guys, just a reminder that we want to hear your voice. If you like the show, please remember to leave a 5-star review on iTunes, or let us know that you like it by commenting on Spreaker.com or any Spreaker platform, or commenting or leaving a review on whatever platform you may want to get your podcast on. If you like the show, please, again, remember to subscribe, leave a review, because that's how you can support us. Also, if you like the show, please support us by going to Spreaker.com/TSWS, scrolling down and accessing our brand new merchandise store. Yeah, check that out. It's pretty cool. You're going to want to see it. You may have guessed, it is that time, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about the year in music in 2019. We could not really talk about the year in music in 2019 without this guy, Lil Nas X, the maker of this song, Old Town Road, the most successful song, Billboard-wise, most popular song ever recorded. So, yeah, that is what we are seeing here. We're talking about Lil Nas X, some of the biggest music stories of the week, of the year, and Lil Nas X dominated, but so did one other person, and it is someone you probably know with this "Why Men Great Till They Gotta Be Great." Truth hurts. We're talking about Lizzo and Lil Nas X. We give co-winners of the year in terms of people who had the best year. The woman who, and the man, really, who launched 1,000 memes and really defined this year in music through a optimism that we haven't really seen in years past. A kind of desire to live your best life, do the things you want to do, be crazy, be wild, just do you, kind of. That's really what we saw from Lil Nas X. Horses in the Back, the iconic lines that came out of that song. Of course, Lizzo, Truth Hurts, and Juice, and Good as Hell. Her inspirational story of finally making it on the music scene. Something that really rarely ever happens. Just really bringing her energy as a big black girl onto the scene. So that was really cool to see as well. Probably the two biggest stories, I think, this year in music. But really broadly, 2019 was a year that which we saw a lot of the bigger, more established stars sit sit out. Like, there's some people who we did not see coming in 2019, Lizzo and Lil Nas X, two perfect examples, and really having bigger years and putting themselves on the map. I think the cool thing about this year is, as